My Uncle Frank died today. Although he never married and had no children, at least that we know of, he was certainly a second father to his 18 nieces and nephews. Frank was the uncle you'd call from jail when you didn't want your parents to find out. The uncle who gave the sage advice to deny everything and demand proof, and never give your crush or the police anything in writing. The bottom right drawer in his desk is chock full of 40 years worth of IOUs from all of us, and I don't think he ever called any of those debts in. He was the sin eater for all of our youthful indiscretions, and the clearing of those debts today is an inheritance to treasure, if not brag about. It's a miracle that none of the Landauer aunts or uncles died in their youths, given the wild and crazy antics they got up to. And it's another miracle that none of their children ended up in prison, given the changing societal expectations of appropriate public behavior. Jail, sure, once or twice, but it was Consigliere Frank who kept us out of the slammer and our records expunged. When my father had his stroke, he was the one who stepped in and covered the mortgage when everything was in chaos. And he was the one who found out a way to get my mother back on premium health insurance so she could have her colossal ovarian cyst removed safely. In a very real sense, he was the pater familias. He is the one who became a caretaker to our Boxing Hall of Fame grandfather when pugilist dementia dulled his senses but not his right hook. Just ask that male nurse whose jaw Grandpa broke when he woke him up too abruptly from a nap. And our dear grandmother Jean when the emphysema took its toll. He maintained the family household, and even when family dinner every Sunday became family dinner every holiday, it was always Frank who hosted and Frank who cooked those epic prime rib roasts. And in the summers, he'd get out his gelato machine and make some watermelon sorbet. And I don't think I've ever tasted anything more delicious in my life. He was quite the gourmand with a taste for the finer things in life, be it a nice bottle of Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, or the French delicacies of his favorite local haunts, Tante Louise, or the Italian of Undici or Faro. He was famous for ordering one of everything on the menu, and upon finishing all of it, telling the waiter, "Let's do that again." I fondly remember a trip Frank, my dad, and I took to California when I was a child. We sped out there in his maroon Thunderbird, amazingly avoiding the police the whole way. He showed us the house he lived on the beach. We fed a swarm of Siegel's popcorn and won all the prizes at Disneyland Park. In my youth, he and my father Paul shared a business and an office in the basement of our house on Columbine Street. Well, I don't think I'll ever forgive him for having to rehome our border collie Sassy because she had the good sense to bite him. His frequent presence in our home meant that there were quite often 3 Landauer men plotting and scheming under the same roof. Frank and my father revolutionized lawyer advertising marketing. As their slogan said, the Landauer Lions made millionaires by the dozens. When you see attorneys on TV today giving themselves epithets like the Hammer or the Strong Arm and declaring that they can get you as much money as they can as fast as they can, they are walking a path trailblazed by my uncle and father, pale imitations of the tough and smart Landauer boys. They were so effective that bar associations across the country changed their rules to require lawyers themselves appear in their own ads instead of the trained actors who could actually deliver the lines with the appropriate theatricality. No one wrote a better poison pen letter than Frank. His wit was as sharp as his tongue, and even though the frequent targets of his art were trial lawyers who should be inured from the insults and prepared to offer a retort, Frank had the ability to completely dismantle people with his words. I recall one attorney wrote back that he had never been so completely and devastatingly insulted in his entire life that he unconditionally surrendered, lest another letter from Frank be the end of him. He also had a power to uplift with his words. He was the eulogist for my sister Leanne when she was taken much too young from aplastic anemia. And he helped my father write the eulogy for my Uncle Tom on the other side of the family. That speech shook the executives at Colgate-Palmolive, where my uncle was vice president, that my father not only gave it at his funeral, they flew him back to give it to the board and a collection of other industry executives. And it was also printed and distributed to every single employee. He helped me write my first paper in high school. We got a C. But by the time I graduated with his mentorship, I was captain of the debate team, the lead attorney of the undefeated mock trial team, and gave the most lauded graduation speech in front of my 800 classmates and the 10,000 visitors in the stadium. It's one of the fondest memories and something even Hollywood has never matched. Frank helped me craft a wedding blessing for my Basque brother Eduardo, who was an exchange student with us for a year when I was in middle school. Dad and I made a return trip to Spain a decade later to celebrate Eduardo's wedding, and Eduardo's sister helped me translate the toast into Spanish. Much like the graduation speech, the toast, which included a particularly beautiful passage from Jerome K. Jerome, ended up in thunderous applause and chants of USA, USA, USA from the otherwise exclusively European audience. Among all the polished scripts, erudite letters, papers, and speeches, perhaps the most precious memory I have of Frank's ability with words were ones spoken in kindness that were not practiced nor written down, but off the cuff and never meant for greater consumption. When my parents were flying back and forth to New York during the final weeks of Leanne's life, hoping for a miracle that wouldn't come at Sloan Kettering's Children's Cancer Center, Frank had the good sense to record one of the phone calls back home. I found the tape many years later, still in the mini cassette recorder, wrapped in the microphone that you had to attach to the back of the handset with a suction cup. On it, Frank consoled my sister during her treatment and gave her an update of all the trouble her 2-year-old younger brother had gotten into without her there to keep him in line. Getting to hear her laugh and her voice as an adult, when I can remember them, is a truly special gift, and one that Frank never knew that he gave me. Another gift that he gave that he was never properly thanked for, so I'll rectify that error now, was being an example of how to live a meaningful life as a gay man in a world and at a time that wasn't ready to make that path an easy one. Frank never came out, even to the family, but it wasn't much of a secret. When I made the choice a few years ago to come out myself, I received nothing but love from my mostly conservative, predominantly Catholic family, and undoubtedly that was due to the quiet and powerful trailblazing that Frank had done to show the normalcy and unoffensive quality of just being who you are. When I was driving Frank and my father home from their brother Tom's funeral, they both were rather adamant that they didn't want a service. But I can't let today pass without sharing a toast to my Uncle Frank. So I'll share with you that wedding toast that Uncle Frank recited to me from memory, so perhaps you who didn't know him can still honor his legacy by stealing some of his eloquence for your next speech. May your boat in life be light, packed with only what you need. A homely home and simple pleasures, 1 or 2 friends worthy of the name, someone to love and someone to love you, a cat, a dog, and a pipe or two, enough to eat, enough to wear, and a little more than enough to drink, for thirst is a dangerous thing. Wherever you are, Frank, I hope that you have enough to eat and more than enough to drink. Cheers to you, Uncle, on a life well lived. And I pity St. Peter right now, who is clearly getting a ration of shit from you if he didn't swiftly open the gate and let you in. Cheers, Uncle.